Once again, summer has come to an end. The leaves slowly change colors as nature prepares itself for the cold, long winter ahead. And though the sun still shines brightly in the sky, the days grow colder and colder. Aren't those kinds of days just perfect to have a warm cup of tea with a friend? Hello there, I'm Isabelle, and today I'm making a werewolf doll. Let's get started, shall we? So for this doll, I won't be making her body entirely from scratch like I did in my other doll videos. Instead, I'll be customizing a rainbow high doll. These dolls have huge heads and, in my opinion, kinda strange face proportions. I don't know what it is exactly, maybe the eyes are too far apart or too big? Maybe too cat-like? Whatever the reason, the head's gotta go. I'll summon my inner Sid from Toy Story and remove her head, so I can customize her body and sculpt her a new head. I'll dunk this poor doll in boiling hot water, let her steep for a couple of minutes so the heat can soften the plastic. I truly hope toys aren't sentient like in the Toy Story movies, because she's about to go through a lot. I'll take her out of the water, wrap her head in a towel so I don't burn myself, and pull it off. So before I go any further with the body modifications, I'll do a couple of sketches on my iPad so I have a good idea of what I want this character to look like. I wanted to make something fall related, maybe something a bit whimsical or a monster of some sort. I tried a few different concepts before I settled on this one. As you can see, she's a werewolf, but I made her a cottagecore werewolf. I really love her design. I think she just looks so adorable, and I can't wait to bring her to life. To make it easier to handle the head while I sculpt, I'll grab a takeout chopstick, cut it in half, and stick a ball of foil at the top. Then I'll cover that in polymer clay. I'll stick a small clay banana on the forehead for her brow bone, then another one for her nose, then a big clay banana for her jaw, and 2 balls of clay for her cheeks. It looks a bit funny now, but I'm gonna blend the clay, and it's still not great, but it's starting to look more and more like a face. Let's trust the process. At this point, I'm gonna slowly build up the facial features so it looks somewhat similar to my sketch. So I'll remove and add a bit of clay here and there, and try to make her head as symmetrical as I can. I'll map out the placement for the eyes, nose, and mouth. I'll add more clay to form her nose and blend that in with the rest of the face. Refine the shapes a little more. Heads are not easy to sculpt, even though I've made a few in the past, I still have a hard time with it. If I remember correctly, I spent at least 3 hours sculpting it, if not more. So hopefully this is something I can get better and faster at the more I make. Anyways, I'll shape her mouth with my tool and continue refining the face a bit more. Then I position these paper templates as a guide to cut out the shape of the eyes. I want to be able to make her eyeballs separately and add them to the head later on. It's not something I've done before, so I hope this is gonna work. Not gonna lie, this makes her look extremely cursed. I'll place her teeth in her mouth and add her tiny little fangs. Then I refine the lip shape a bit more, and with that done, I can smooth out the clay with rubbing alcohol to make her head as smooth as possible. I'm still gonna sand the head later on, but it's better to get it as smooth as I can at this stage. Then I bake the clay. Once it had cooled down, I checked the sizing of the head with the body. I was a bit worried that it might be too small, so I decided to make the body modification and the dress first, and then finish the head, so I can better gauge if the sizing is okay with the bulk of the dress and everything else. And just for fun, here's a size comparison between the original head and mine. So let's get on with the body mods. There's a couple of things I want to modify on the body. First, I want to slim and elongate her neck, so I'm gonna sand off the plastic a bit on each side. I should probably remove the head anchor first, so let's do that. It took a bit of force, but I got it. Finished slimming the neck down with a Dremel off camera because I wasn't getting anywhere by hand. So inside the neck there's a pin that goes through from the front to the back, and since I removed the head anchor, I'll thread an elastic cord around that so I can use it to attach the head to the neck later on. Next, I mixed a small amount of epoxy clay and applied it around the neck to make it longer. I tried to smooth out the epoxy as much as I could and then let it harden overnight. Bonne nuit. Boing boing boing, boing boing. It looks like little antennas. The next morning, the epoxy had hardened and I sanded the neck smooth. Next, I'm gonna modify her hands. And by modify, I mean make an entirely new pair in polymer clay. The doll hands have this little loop peg that allows them to pivot, so I'll cut the hands apart to harvest that piece. I'll start sculpting her finger with a tiny bean shape. Make a little indent with my tool. Smooth that out a bit by rolling it between my fingers. Then add an itty bitty little nail on top. And stick a tiny little circle to make her little paw beans. This makes it look so cute. And that's one finger done. I'll make and bake the other 9 off camera. I'll shape a blob of clay into a palm. Then insert each finger one by one, gently blending the clay around before I add another one. I want her hands to still look like human hands, but also look like paws. Maybe something went wrong and she's not able to fully transform, and now she's stuck in between her human and wolf form. I didn't want her to look scary. In fact, I think she'd be a nice werewolf, not the I will eat you kind. She'd have a super bubbly and friendly personality. I picture her living alone in a cabin in the woods, probably because humans are afraid of her. But from time to time, a lost hiker would turn up, and she'd be thrilled to have company. They'd probably run away screaming, but the brave ones would accept her offer for a cup of tea. Anyways, I'm done with the hands. Aren't they adorable? Oh, it's just so boopable. Boop boop. I'll cut a slit at the bottom of her wrist. Why does this sound so violent? I'm so sorry. I'll insert the loop peg, drill a hole from side to side, then inserted a toothpick to secure the hand to the peg. Check that it pivots properly. Did that for both hands and bake the clay. Without the plastic pegs on though, for obvious reasons. Just for fun, here's the size comparison between the original hand and mine. Once the paw hands had cooled down, I did multiple coats of brown paint, then added a darker brown on her fingers and blended that in to make a gradient. I'll paint her little beans pink. I don't know what it is about these hands, but I find them so adorable. Then I painted her nails black with a coat of gloss varnish to make them shiny. Next, I'm gonna add the loop peg and insert the toothpick. Cut off the excess on both sides. And I added a bit of epoxy clay to seal the toothpick in place and fill in the holes. The next thing on the list is to add fur on her arms and legs. So I sanded her limbs to help the glue adhere to the plastic. Then I'll prepare the fur by cutting several pieces of acrylic yarn, tying them around the handle of my silicone tool. Then I'll unravel each individual strand with a needle tool. Run my straightener through it, and brush out the strands with my dog's brush until it looks like this. Then I've made a lot more off camera because I'll need some more for her tail as well. I'll add a coat of glue on the arm and gently glue the fur around it. I'll make my way to about half of her forearm before switching to a lighter color. This is felting yarn, so I won't have to brush it out like acrylic yarn. It's not a perfect match, but it's the closest color to her skin tone that I could find. I'll continue gluing the yarn around her forearm until it looks like this. I won't bother going up any higher because the sleeves of the dress will cover that part anyways. I'll do the other arm in the exact same way. Give the glue a moment to dry completely and then pop her hands on. I'll also trim the fur so it looks less shaggy. I kinda wish I had left the fur a bit longer than that, especially on her wrists. Then I went in with some very watered down brown paint to better blend in the two fur colors and make a prettier gradient. With that done, let's make her tail. I made a hole in her butt with a Dremel big enough to insert a magnet so her tail will be easy to remove. I secured the magnet in place with epoxy clay and made her tail armature as well. Wait, hold on, where did the fur go? Well, I was working on multiple parts at the same time and it made more sense to edit it this way than go back and forth. That's all, let's go! Next, I'll cut a sponge in half, add a generous amount of glue, and sandwich the two pieces around the tail armature. The sponge will allow the tail to remain flexible so I can pose it if I need to. I'll trim the sponge to a more tail-appropriate shape. When I was happy with the shape, I painted it brown. Gotta say, it looks like poop. Let's ignore that for a minute and paint her neck and her butt while that dries. Once all the paint was dry, I started gluing the fur around the tail. This is the same process I followed for the arms. I got about here and I figured it would probably be easier if I prepared hair weft. So that's what I did, and it made it so much easier and faster to glue around the tail. I should have just done that from the start. So once the tail was entirely covered in fur, I let the glue dry completely and gave it a little trim. I suppose this is where my experience at cutting mine and my sister's hair really shines through. It looks okay. Then I'll use some watered down paint to darken the ends of the tail. While everything is still wet, I'll style the fur with my fingers. The paint did make the fur a little stiff once it dried, which is useful in this case, because I didn't have any hair gel. So that completes all of the body modifications. Next, let's make her dress. Off camera, I made and cut the dress pattern on a stretchy t-shirt fabric. I did find a similar dress tutorial that I will link if ever you want to make something like this, cause mine's a bit chaotic. So first, I sewed gather stitches on both the top and bottom of the sleeves. I'm sewing with paper underneath because the fabric was a bit flimsy. I pulled on the thread to gather the fabric, then folded the ribbon in half and glued the ribbon over the raw edge of the fabric. Did the same thing on the other sleeve. Then place the bodice pieces good side to good side and sew the shoulder seams. It was easier to do the sewing by hand since I didn't leave enough seam allowance for the machine when I made the pattern. And sewing with the paper was really annoying anyways. So next I gathered the top hem of the sleeve and pinned it in place on the bodice. I sewed that in place and then did the same thing on the other side. Then I sewed the side seams on both sides and flipped it over. I tried to make a little heart-shaped cutout like I made in my sketch, but the bodice is so small that the closest I could do is a triangle. Close enough, I guess. I sealed the edge with a bit of glue, and I added some wonky decorative stitches around the heart. And that completes the top bodice. For the skirt, I simply sewed one of the seams together, then gathered the ribbon to make a ruffle, and sewed that all around the bottom edge of the skirt. I made a second ruffle by cutting out a strip with pinking shears. It makes the ruffle look very nice, and it will also prevent the edge from fraying. I had to cut multiple strips, and then threaded it like an accordion through my needle like this. Then sewed it to the skirt. I added little patches and decorative stitches before folding the skirt good side to good side and sewing the side seam close. Next, I sewed the skirt to the bodice, but I did that directly on the doll. Oh, it looks so pretty already. I'll add one more ruffle trim on her bodice. Then I'll add a little ribbon around her collar and glue a tiny bow on it. Off camera, I also added the fur to her legs and made her tiny socks. For her sandals, I simply customized the one that came with the doll by cutting off the top part and painting it black. I'll add a pretty ribbon on both sandals, and that's it for the clothes. Now I can go back to the head and finish it. In the end, the head size was the right size, so I didn't have to remake it, which was nice. I drew a line where I'll cut her skull open. I'll remove the foil inside. Every time I make a doll, I feel like a mad doctor. Anyways, off camera, I added a little rim inside so the pieces can fit nicely together, and finish the neck hole so the head can hopefully pivot on the neck. Whoop. I did notice that the symmetry on the eyes was off. As you can see, the eye on the right is lower than the one on the left, so I'm gonna have to do a little eye surgery to fix that. That looks pretty good. Now let's make her a wig cap. For her wig cap, I first wrapped the head in plastic film. Then I stretched out 2 layers of stockings around her head and secured it with an elastic. Then I applied a thick coat of white glue. Waited for that to dry completely before adding 3 more coats of glue. Then I trimmed and painted the wig cap. I painted the section of her braids and where her ears will go. I did follow a braiding tutorial to try to get the hair sections right. For the hair, I'm using acrylic yarn that I unravel in half. I'm hoping it gives the impression of twist braids. I then glued a piece of yarn on each section. So first I would glue it upward and then fold the piece on itself like so. And I did that again and again and again and again and again and again. Okay, you get it by now. When I got to the front of her wig, I glued a couple of strands inside the wig cap, then flipped them over to cover the seam. Then I give the hair a little trim, and I can move on to painting her face. I'll start with the base colors, then went in with a colored pencil to sketch her features. Once I was done mapping out her eyes and eyebrows, I went over the lines with paint. I don't have much to say about the process, so here's a fun fact. The French word for werewolf is loup-garou. Loup means wolf, and garou is not only a one-punch-man villain, but also a well-known French-Canadian singer. Wow, that was like 3 fun facts into one. I love fun facts. Anyways, when I was done painting, I used soft pastels to blush her cheeks. I absolutely overdid it with the blush, so I had to take some off. Off camera, I also made her eyeballs and stuck them inside the head with gum tack. And the last thing to do is her ears, which I sculpted off camera with flexible air-dry clay. I painted them, glued yarn all over, then trimmed the fur, and glued the ears on the wing. Next, I strung the elastic through her head and tied a knot to secure it in place. I'll shove the excess in the head in case I ever need to untie it. Then add a bit of gum tack so it holds in place, close the head, add the wig on top, and that's it. Let's see those final shots. What do you think? I think she came out super cute. And by the way, she still doesn't have a name yet, so please feel free to leave a suggestions in the comments. On that note, thanks for watching, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time. I think I'm lost.